The old clock on the kitchen wall showed 2:47 a.m. when Lisa heard the front door slam shut. Her heart jumped. He was back. She pulled the thin blanket closer around her shoulders and listened to the heavy footsteps coming down the hallway. The smell of alcohol and cigarettes filled the small trailer as her husband stumbled into the living room. "Where's my dinner?" he shouted, his words slurred and angry. Lisa closed her eyes tight. She had learned not to answer when he was like this. In the back bedroom, she could hear her daughter Amy whimpering. The little girl was only 4 years old, but she already knew to stay quiet when Daddy came home angry. "I'm talking to you," he yelled louder, throwing something across the room. The sound of breaking glass made Lisa jump, her 6-year-old son. Danny peeked out from behind the couch where he had been hiding. His big brown eyes were wide with fear. Lisa motioned for him to go back to his sister's room and stay there. The boy nodded and quietly disappeared down the hallway. This wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the worst time. But something inside Lisa's chest felt different tonight. Maybe it was the way Amy had asked her yesterday why Mommy always had bruises on her arms. Maybe it was how Danny had started wetting his bed again because he was so scared all the time. Or maybe it was just that Lisa couldn't take another night of walking on eggshells in her own home. Her husband kicked a chair across the room and cursed loudly. "You think you can ignore me? You think you're better than me?" Lisa stood up slowly, her hands shaking. "The kids are sleeping. Please keep your voice down. Don't tell me what to do in my own house." He moved toward her, raising his hand. That's when Lisa made her decision. She couldn't do this anymore. Her children couldn't live like this anymore. They deserved better than hiding in bedrooms and jumping at every sound. They deserved to sleep peacefully at night without fear. While her husband passed out on the couch, Lisa quietly packed a small bag. She took only what they absolutely needed, some clothes for the kids, a few toys, and what little money she had saved from her part-time job at the grocery store. $17. That was all she had in the world. She woke Amy first, holding her finger to her lips. "We're going on a trip, sweetheart, but we have to be very quiet, okay?" Amy nodded, still half asleep. Lisa dressed her quickly and then went to get Danny. The boy was already awake, sitting up in bed like he had been waiting for something to happen. "Are we leaving, Daddy?" he whispered. Lisa's heart broke at the hope in his voice. "Yes, baby. We're going somewhere safe." They crept through the trailer like shadows. Lisa's hands shook as she opened the front door, afraid the hinges would squeak and wake him up. But the door opened quietly, and they stepped out into the cool night air. The old pickup truck in the driveway had been her father's before he died. It was rusty and dented, but it still ran most of the time. Lisa had kept it when her husband wanted to sell it, telling him she needed it for work. Really, she had kept it because somewhere deep down she always knew this day would come. She buckled the kids into the back seat and started the engine. It coughed and sputtered, but finally turned over. As they drove away from the trailer park, Lisa felt like she could breathe for the first time in years. But then the fear set in. Where could they go? Her parents were both gone. Her sister lived across the country and barely spoke to her anymore. Lisa had lost touch with most of her friends over the years. Her husband had slowly cut her off from everyone she cared about, making her feel like she had no one but him, the homeless shelter. In town was always full, with waiting lists that stretched for months. Lisa had called them before, but they always said the same thing: no space available. She had checked into staying at the women's shelter, but they had strict rules about how long you could stay, and Lisa knew her husband would find her there. Eventually, as she drove through the empty streets, a memory came back to her. When she was 8 years old, her family had gone camping in the mountains near the reservation. Her dad had taken her hiking, and they had come across an old mining shack. It was abandoned and falling apart, but it had 4 walls and a roof. Her dad had told her stories about the miners who used to work there, looking for silver in the mountains. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was a place where her husband would never think to look for them. It was far enough away that they could start over, maybe find work in one of the small towns nearby. The drive took longer than Lisa remembered. The old truck started making strange noises after the first hour, and she worried it might break down. Amy fell asleep in the back seat, but Danny stayed awake, watching the dark landscape pass by outside the window. "Where are we going, Mom?" he asked quietly. "Somewhere safe," Lisa said again. She wished she could give him a better answer, but she honestly didn't know what they would find when they got there. The mountain road was rough and winding. Lisa had to drive slowly because the truck's headlights were dim and she could barely see where she was going. Every bump in the road made her worry that they would get stuck or that something would break. Then it happened. About 2 miles from where she remembered the shack being, the truck started smoking. The engine made a loud grinding noise and then just stopped. Lisa tried to start it again, but nothing happened. They were stranded on a dark mountain road with no phone service and no way to call for help. "Is the car broken?" Amy asked, waking up from all the noise. Lisa looked at her too. Children in the rearview mirror. They were depending on her to keep them safe, and she had led them to the middle of nowhere with no plan and no way forward. For a moment, she felt like the worst mother in the world, but then she remembered why they were here. Back at the trailer, her children lived in constant fear. They never knew when the next angry outburst would come or if they would be safe in their own beds. At least here, they were away from all that. At least here, they had a chance. "Yes, baby, the car is broken," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice calm. "But we're going to walk the rest of the way. It's not far." She gathered their few belongings and took Amy in her arms. The little girl was getting heavy, but Lisa knew she couldn't walk the whole way on her own little legs. Danny held onto his mom's free hand as they started walking up the dark mountain path. The air was cold and thin. Lisa's arms ached from carrying Amy, and her feet hurt in the old sneakers she was wearing. But she kept walking. Every step was taking them further away from the life they had left behind and closer to whatever came next. After what felt like hours, Lisa saw the outline of the old shack against the night sky. It looked even more run-down than she remembered, but it was still standing. As they got closer, she could see that some of the windows were broken and the roof was missing shingles. But it had walls and a door, and right now that was enough. "Is this our new house?" Amy asked as Lisa pushed open the creaky wooden door. Lisa looked around at the dusty, empty room. There was no electricity, no running water, and no furniture. Just 4 walls and a roof to keep the rain out. But for the first time in years, Lisa felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. "Yes, sweetheart," she said, setting Amy down on the floor. "This is our new house." The first morning in the shack, Lisa woke up to Amy crying. The little girl was cold and scared, huddled in the corner where they had slept on the hard wooden floor. Danny was already awake, sitting quietly by the broken window, looking out at the mountains. "I'm hungry, Mommy," Amy whispered, her voice shaky. Lisa's heart sank. She had brought a few crackers and a small jar of peanut butter, but that wouldn't last long. She looked around the empty shack in the daylight and realized just how bad their situation was. The roof had several holes that let in cold air and rain. The windows were mostly broken, with jagged glass still hanging in the frames. There was no electricity, no running water, and no way to cook food, but Lisa had to stay strong for her children. She couldn't let them see how scared she was. "Let's have breakfast," she said with a smile she didn't feel. She opened the jar of peanut butter and spread it on crackers, giving most of it to Amy and Danny. She pretended she wasn't hungry. Even though her stomach was growling, after they ate, Lisa got to work making the shack more livable. She used old newspapers she found scattered around to cover the broken windows. The papers were yellow and torn, but they helped keep out some of the cold wind. She gathered dry wood from outside to build a fire in the old fireplace, though she worried about the smoke giving away their location. The children helped as much as they could. Danny collected small sticks for kindling, and Amy picked up trash from the floor. Working together made them feel like they were building something, not just surviving. "Mom, why can't we just go to a hotel?" Danny asked as they worked. Lisa paused, holding a piece of newspaper. How could she explain to a 6-year-old that they had no money for a hotel? That $17 wouldn't even buy them one night in the cheapest motel. Hotels are expensive, honey, she said simply. And this place is free. We can stay here as long as we need to. The first few days were the hardest. Lisa had to learn how to make a fire without matches. She used an old lighter she found in her purse, but it was running out of fluid. She had to figure out how to keep the children warm at night when the mountain air got so cold their breath came out in little clouds. Water was their biggest problem. Lisa had brought 2 small bottles, but they were gone by the second day. She remembered seeing a stream about a mile down the mountain, so she left the children in the shack while she went to fill the bottles. The walk was hard and she worried the whole time about leaving Amy and Danny alone, but the children were brave. When Lisa came back, she found them playing a quiet game with some smooth rocks they had found outside. They had made up a story about the rocks being magical stones that could grant wishes. Amy's wish was for pizza. Danny's wish was for their daddy to stop being mean. Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. She couldn't cry in front of her children. She had to be their strength. Finding food became Lisa's daily mission. She walked to the stream every morning to get water, and along the way she looked for anything they could eat. She found wild berries growing on bush, small, sour things that made their mouths pucker, but they were food. She found nuts that had fallen from trees. Though many were already eaten by squirrels, Lisa had grown up in the city and knew nothing about living in the wilderness. She was learning as she went, making mistakes that could have been dangerous. Once, she brought back berries that she later realized might have been poisonous. She threw them away before the children could eat them, her hands shaking as she thought about what could have happened. The children got thinner every day. Amy stopped running around and playing. She would just sit quietly, saving her energy. Danny tried to be helpful, but Lisa could see he was getting weaker too. His clothes hung loose on his small frame, and he got tired from simple tasks like gathering sticks. After 2 weeks, Lisa knew she had to find work. The nearest town was 15 miles away, but she had no choice. She left the children in the shack with strict instructions to stay hidden and not make any noise. "I'll be back before dark," she promised, kissing both of them goodbye. The walk to town took her 3 hours. Her feet were covered in blisters, and she was dizzy from not eating enough, but she kept going. The town was small, just a few shops, a diner, and a gas station. Lisa went to every business asking if they needed help. "Do you have experience?" the diner owner asked. "Yes, I worked at restaurants before," Lisa lied. She had only worked at a grocery store, but she was desperate. "Do you have a phone number where I can reach you?" Lisa's heart sank. She had no phone, no address, no way for anyone to contact her. "I don't have a phone right now," she said quietly. The woman looked at her strangely. "How am I supposed to call you about shifts?" Lisa tried to explain that she could come by every day to check, but the woman shook her head. "I need reliable workers, people I can reach when I need them." It was the same story everywhere she went. Nobody wanted to hire someone with no phone, no address, and 2 small children. Lisa walked back to the shack that evening with nothing but sore feet and a broken heart. The children were waiting for her, huddled together for warmth. Amy ran to her as soon as she walked in. "Mommy, I was scared you wouldn't come back," the little girl said. Lisa held her tight. "I'll always come back to you, sweetheart, always." But privately, Lisa was starting to panic. It had been 3 weeks since they left the trailer, and their situation was getting worse, not better. The weather was getting colder as autumn approached. Amy had started coughing at night. Danny was so thin that Lisa could see his ribs. When he took off his shirt, Lisa tried to hunt for more food, but she didn't know how. She made traps out of sticks and string, but she never caught anything. She tried fishing in the stream with a makeshift hook, but the fish were too smart for her clumsy attempts. One morning, Lisa woke up and Amy wouldn't get out of bed. The little girl just lay there, staring at the ceiling with dull eyes. Are you sick, baby?" Lisa asked, feeling Amy's forehead. The child didn't have a fever, but something was wrong. "I'm just tired, Mommy," Amy whispered. Lisa knew it wasn't just tiredness. Her daughter was starving. They all were. Lisa had given most of her food to the children, eating only a few berries and nuts each day. She was getting weak too, but she had to stay strong for them that night. As Lisa lay awake listening to her children's labored breathing, she faced a terrible truth. They were dying, slowly, quietly, but surely dying. The berries and nuts weren't enough. The cold mountain air was too much for their weakened bodies. And winter was coming. Lisa had tried so hard to save her children from one danger that she had led them into another. She had wanted to give them a better life, but instead, she had brought them to this empty place where they might not survive. As tears rolled down her cheeks, Lisa wondered if she had made the worst mistake of her life. But there was no going back now. They were too weak to make the long journey to town, and she had no money for help even if they could get there. All she could do was hold her children close and hope that somehow, some way, they would see another sunrise. Joseph had been walking these mountains since he was a boy. His grandfather had taught him how to track animals, how to read the signs in the dirt, and how to move quietly through the forest. Now, at 35, he was one of the best trackers in the Navajo Nation. People called him when they needed help finding lost hikers or when hunters wounded animals that needed to be put out of their misery. Today, he was following a deer that had been shot by a careless hunter. The animal was bleeding and suffering, and Joseph felt it was his duty to find it and end its pain. His grandfather had always taught him that when you take from nature, you must do it with respect and complete the job properly. The trail had led him higher into the mountains than he usually went. These were the old hunting grounds where his ancestors had hunted for hundreds of years. His grandfather used to tell him stories about this place, how the spirits of their people still watched over the land, how every rock and tree had meaning. As Joseph climbed higher, following the spots of blood on the ground, he noticed something strange. There was smoke rising from the old mining shack. That building had been abandoned for over 20 years. Nobody went up there anymore. The mining company had given up trying to find silver in these mountains long ago, and the shack had been left to fall apart. Joseph stopped walking and watched the thin line of smoke drifting up into the sky. His first thought was that maybe some teenagers were using the place to party or hide from their parents. But something felt different about this. The smoke was too small, too careful. It looked like someone was trying not to be noticed. He decided to leave the wounded deer for now and check out the shack. As he got closer, he could hear something that made his blood run cold. It was the sound of a child crying, weak and tired, like they had been crying for a long time. Joseph moved more carefully now, using the skills his grandfather had taught him. He stayed low and quiet, moving from tree to tree. He wasn't trying to scare anyone, but he needed to know what was happening. When he reached the edge of the clearing where the shack stood, Joseph crouched behind a large rock and listened. He could hear voices inside, a woman's voice, very soft, and then a small child asking for water. The voices sounded weak, desperate. Joseph's heart started beating faster. These weren't teenagers having fun. These were people in trouble. He moved closer to the shack, staying hidden behind trees. The building looked even worse than he remembered. The roof was full of holes, and newspapers were taped over the broken windows. Someone had tried to fix it up, but it was still barely livable. Joseph found a gap between two boards where he could see inside without being seen. What he saw made his stomach turn. A woman was sitting on the floor, holding a small girl who looked like she could barely lift her head. A boy, maybe 6 years old, was lying nearby, so thin that Joseph could see his ribs through his shirt. The woman herself looked terrible. Her face was gaunt, her clothes were dirty and torn, and her eyes had the hollow look of someone who had given up hope. But she was still trying to take care of her children, still trying to comfort them even though she was clearly starving too. Joseph had seen poverty before. He had grown up on the reservation where money was always tight and jobs were hard to find, but this was different. This was life and death. These people were dying. The little girl in the woman's arms made a sound that was barely a whisper. "Mommy, I'm so cold." The woman pulled her closer, but Joseph could see that she was shivering too. "I know, baby. Try to sleep. Maybe when you wake up, you'll feel better." But Joseph could tell that the child wasn't going to feel better. None of them were. They were too far gone, too weak, too hungry. If someone didn't help them soon, they would die in this abandoned shack. Joseph's grandfather had always told him that the spirits would put people in his path who needed help. "When you see someone suffering," the old man had said, "you become responsible for them. You can't just walk away and pretend you didn't see." Joseph knew what he had to do, but he had to be careful. These people were clearly running from something. Or someone. They wouldn't have chosen to live in this terrible place unless they had no other choice. If he scared them, they might try to run, and they were too weak to survive much longer. He backed away from the shack and sat down behind a tree to think. Who were these people? Why were they hiding here? The woman looked young, probably in her 20s. The children were small and innocent. They didn't look like criminals or troublemakers. They looked like a family that had run out of options. Joseph thought about his own family. His sister worked at the health clinic on the reservation. She would know what to do about the children's condition. His grandmother always had extra food and would never turn away hungry people. The tribal council had programs to help families in crisis, but first, he had to approach them without scaring them away. Joseph stood up and walked around to the front of the shack. He knocked gently on the doorframe, not wanting to startle them, but needing to announce his presence. "Hello," he called out softly. "My name is Joseph. I'm from the Navajo Nation. I'm not here to hurt you." The voices inside the shack went completely silent. Joseph could imagine the woman's terror, wondering if someone had found them, if they were about to lose their hiding place. "I can see that you need help," Joseph continued, his voice gentle and calm. "I want to help you. I have food and water." After a long moment, he heard the woman's voice, shaky and scared. "Please go away. We're not bothering anyone." "I know you're not," Joseph said, "but you're sick. Your children are sick." "I can help you get better." There was another long silence. Then Joseph heard the little girl's voice, so weak it was barely audible. "Mommy, did he say he has food?" Joseph's heart broke. These children were so hungry that the mention of food was enough to get their attention even in their weakened state. "Yes," Joseph called out, "I have food and water and warm clothes. But I need you to trust me." He heard whispering inside the shack, then the sound of someone moving slowly. The door opened just a crack, and Joseph saw one eye peering out at him. "Who are you?" the woman asked. "My name is Joseph. I live on the reservation down the mountain. I was tracking a wounded deer when I saw your smoke. I want to help you." The door opened a little wider, and Joseph saw the woman's face. She was even thinner than he had realized, with dark circles under her eyes and cuts on her hands from trying to fix the shack. "We don't have any money," she said quietly. Joseph shook his head. "I don't want money. In my culture, when we see people who need help, we help them. It's that simple." The woman stared at him for a long moment, trying to decide if she could trust this stranger. Behind her, Joseph could hear the children moving weakly. "My children are dying," she finally whispered, tears starting to fall down her cheeks. "I know," Joseph said gently, "but they don't have to die. Let me help you. Let me help them." The woman looked back at her children, then at Joseph. For the first time in weeks, she saw something she had almost forgotten: hope. Joseph looked at the three people huddled in the doorway of the shack and knew he had to act fast. The children were in worse shape than he had first thought. The little girl could barely keep her eyes open, and the boy was so weak he was leaning against the wall just to stay upright. "I need to get you some water right away," Joseph said, pulling a water bottle from his backpack. "But you have to drink it slowly, very slowly." Lisa took the bottle with shaking hands. She wanted to drink it all at once, but she forced herself to take small sips before giving it to Amy. The little girl's lips were cracked and dry, and she could only manage tiny drops at first. Joseph watched them carefully. His grandfather had taught him about people who were starving. If you gave them too much food or water too quickly, it could make them sicker. Their bodies had forgotten how to handle normal amounts of food. "I'm going to call my sister," Joseph sighed, taking out his phone. "She's a nurse. She knows about these things. Lisa's eyes went wide with fear. No, please don't call anyone. They'll take my children away. Joseph knelt down so he was at eye level with her. My sister won't take your children. She helped them get better. But I need to know, are you running from someone dangerous? Lisa nodded, tears streaming down her face. My husband. He hurt us. I had to get them away from him. Joseph's jaw tightened. He had seen this before on the reservation. Men who took out their anger on their families. Women who had to choose between staying and being hurt or leaving and having nowhere to go. He won't find you here, Joseph said firmly. This is our land. We protect people who need protection. Joseph called his sister Maria. He spoke to her in Navajo, quickly explaining what he had found. Maria asked him to describe the children's condition, and Joseph could hear the concern in her voice. She's coming, Joseph told Lisa after hanging up. She's bringing medicine and food that won't hurt their stomachs. While they waited, Joseph did what he could to help. He gave them small pieces of jerky from his backpack, making sure they chewed it slowly. He built up the fire to warm the cold shack. He used his jacket to cover Amy, who was shivering even though the day was warm. Danny hadn't said a word since Joseph arrived, but his eyes followed every movement. Joseph could see the boy was trying to be brave, trying to protect his mother and sister even though he was just a child himself. You're a good big brother, Joseph told him quietly. You've been taking care of your family. Danny nodded, and for the first time, Joseph saw a small smile cross the boy's face. When Maria arrived an hour later, she brought a bag full of supplies. She was a short woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. She had worked at the clinic for 10 years and had seen every kind of emergency, but the sight of these 3 people still shocked her. Oh, honey, she said to Lisa, immediately getting to work. Let me look at these babies. Maria checked the children first. She listened to their hearts and looked at their eyes and mouths. She gave them special drinks that would help their bodies absorb water better. She had brought soft foods, mashed potatoes, soup, and bread that had been soaked in broth. They're dehydrated and malnourished, Maria told Joseph in Navajo. But they're going to be okay if we take care of them. Joseph translated for Lisa, who started crying with relief. She had been so afraid that it was too late, that she had failed her children completely. You saved them, Maria told Lisa. You got them away from danger. That took courage. As the afternoon went on, the children started to look a little better. Amy was able to sit up and drink more water. Danny ate some soup and even asked for seconds. Lisa was afraid to eat much, worried there wouldn't be enough for her children, but Joseph and Maria made sure she ate too. We can't leave you here, Joseph said as evening approached. This place isn't safe. Winter is coming and you need proper shelter. Lisa looked around the shack that had been their home for weeks. It was horrible, but it was the only place they had. I don't have anywhere else to go, she said quietly. You do now, Joseph said. You're coming home with us. Joseph and Maria helped pack up the few belongings the family had. Joseph carried Amy, who was still too weak to walk very far. Maria helped Danny, and Lisa walked slowly beside them. Still not quite believing that help had really come, the walk down the mountain took an hour. Joseph stopped often to let everyone rest. He could see that Lisa was embarrassed about how dirty and thin they all were, but he and Maria acted like it was the most normal thing in the world to find a family living in an abandoned shack. My grandmother is expecting you, Joseph said. As they walked, she's been cooking all afternoon. She makes the best soup on the reservation. I don't want to be a burden, Lisa said, the words she had been thinking all day. You're not a burden, Maria said firmly. You're family now. When someone needs help, we help. That's who we are. When they reached Joseph's grandmother's house, the old woman was waiting on the porch. She was small and wrinkled, but her eyes were bright and welcoming. She had prepared a feast: soup, bread, vegetables from her garden, and sweet tea. Welcome, she said to Lisa in English, then switched to Navajo to speak to Joseph and Maria. The grandmother's house was small but warm. There were colorful blankets on the walls and the smell of sage in the air. For the first time in weeks, Lisa felt safe. Amy and Danny seemed to feel it too. They ate slowly, savoring each bite of the grandmother's soup. That night, the family slept in real beds for the first time in over a month. The grandmother had given them her guest room, which had 2 beds with soft mattresses and warm blankets. Lisa lay awake for a long time, watching her children sleep peacefully, she thought about everything that had happened. 3 days ago, she had been sure they were going to die in that shack. Now they were in a warm house with full stomachs and people who cared about them. It felt like a miracle. Joseph checked on them before he went to his own home next door. "How are you feeling?" he asked Lisa. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You saved our lives." Joseph shook his head. "You saved your own lives? You were brave enough to leave a dangerous situation. You kept your children alive until help came. That's what saved them." Lisa had never thought of herself as brave. She had felt like a failure, like she had put her children in danger by bringing them to the mountains. But maybe Joseph was right. Maybe leaving had been the right thing to do, even if it had been scary and hard. "What happens now?" Lisa asked. "Now, you rest," Joseph said. "You get strong again. We'll figure out the rest as we go." For the first time in months, Lisa went to sleep without fear. She didn't have to worry about angry voices or slamming doors. She didn't have to wonder if there would be food tomorrow. She was surrounded by people who wanted to help her and her children, and that was enough for now. 3 months had passed since that terrible night in the abandoned shack. Lisa watched her children playing in Joseph's grandmother's backyard and could barely believe they were the same kids who had been so weak and sick. Amy was laughing as she chased butterflies, her cheeks pink and healthy. Danny was building something with sticks and stones, his energy completely restored. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. For the first few weeks, Lisa had been afraid to let herself believe that they were truly safe. She would wake up in the middle of the night, panicked that her husband had found them. But slowly, as the days passed peacefully, she began to relax. Joseph had been patient with her fears. He understood that healing from trauma took time. He never pushed her to talk about what had happened, but he was always there when she needed someone to listen. His grandmother had been like a second mother to her, teaching her how to cook traditional foods and showing her the plants that grew wild around the reservation. "You're getting stronger every day," Joseph would tell her when she doubted herself. And it was true. Lisa had gained weight. Her hands had healed from the cuts she got trying to fix the shack. Her eyes had lost that hollow, desperate look. She was starting to look like herself again. The tribal council had helped her get a job at the administrative office. Lisa had been nervous at first, worried that people would judge her for being an outsider who had shown up with nothing. But the people in the office had welcomed her warmly. They needed someone who was good with numbers and paperwork, and Lisa had those skills. "You're a hard worker," her supervisor told her after her first month. "We're lucky to have you." Having a job gave Lisa something she hadn't felt in years: independence. She was earning her own money, making her own decisions. She could buy clothes for her children and put food on the table. It felt amazing to be able to take care of her family. Again, the children had started school on the reservation. Lisa had worried about how they would fit in, but kids were kids everywhere. Amy made friends with a little girl named Rose who lived down the road. Danny became close with a boy who taught him how to fish in the stream behind the school. "Mom, can we stay here forever?" Amy asked one evening as they walked home from the grocery store, Lisa's heart filled with warmth. "Would you like that?" "Yes," Amy said, jumping up and down. "I love it here. Everyone is so nice." Danny nodded in agreement. "And Joseph teaches me cool stuff about animals and plants. He says I'm a natural tracker," Lisa smiled. Joseph had been spending more and more time with her and the children. At first she had thought he was just being kind, helping them because it was the right thing to do. But lately she had noticed the way he looked at her, the way he always seemed to find excuses to stop by and check on them. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Joseph finally said what had been on his mind for weeks. "Lisa, I need to tell you something." She looked at him, nervous about what he might say. "I care about you," he said simply. "Not just as someone who needed help, but as a person." as a woman. I think I'm falling in love with you. Lisa felt her heart skip. She had been having the same feelings, but she had been afraid to admit them, even to herself. After everything she had been through with her husband, she had wondered if she would ever be able to trust a man again. I care about you too, she said quietly, but I'm scared. I don't know if I'm ready for that? Joseph nodded, understanding. I'm not going anywhere. We can take it as slow as you need. Meanwhile, Lisa had been getting letters from a lawyer back home. Her husband had been arrested for something unrelated, a bar fight that had gotten out of hand. He was in jail, and the lawyer was helping Lisa file for divorce. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. You don't have to be afraid anymore, Joseph told her when she got the news. He can't hurt you or the children, Lisa cried with relief. She had been carrying that fear for so long, always looking over her shoulder, always wondering if he would find them. Now she could finally let it go. As winter approached, Joseph's grandmother made an announcement that surprised everyone. I'm getting too old to take care of this big house, she said. Joseph, you should move in here with your family. Lisa blushed. The old woman had been dropping hints for weeks about Joseph and Lisa getting married. In Navajo culture, family was everything, and the grandmother had already started thinking of Lisa and her children as part of the family. Grandmother, Joseph said, embarrassed, we're not married. Not yet, the old woman said with a twinkle in her eye. But you will be. Anyone can see how much you care about each other. Lisa had to admit that the idea didn't scare her anymore. Joseph was nothing like her ex-husband. He was gentle and patient. He treated her children like they were his own. He made her laugh and feel beautiful and smart. One snowy evening in December, Joseph asked Lisa to take a walk with him. They bundled up the children and went to the place where he had first found them, the old mining shack. The building looked different now, covered in snow and even more run down than before. But it didn't scare Lisa anymore. It was just an old building, not the place where they had almost died. I want to ask you something, Joseph said, taking her hands in his. I know we've only known each other for a few months, but I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life. Lisa's heart started beating faster. I want to marry you, he continued. I want to adopt Amy and Danny legally. I want us to be a real family. Lisa looked at this man who had saved her life, who had given her hope when she had none left. She thought about how happy her children were, how safe and loved they felt. Yes, she said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I want that too. Amy and Danny cheered when they heard the news. They had been hoping for this moment too. Joseph had become the father they had always wanted, kind, protective, and fun. The wedding was small but beautiful. It was held in the community center on the reservation, with traditional Navajo ceremonies mixed with some Christian elements. Lisa wore a dress that Joseph's grandmother had made for her, decorated with traditional patterns. The whole community came to celebrate. As Lisa and Joseph exchanged vows, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. The abandoned shack where they had almost died had become the place where they found their new life. The darkest moment of her life had led to the brightest. I never thought I'd be happy again, Lisa told Joseph as they danced at their wedding. You deserve all the happiness in the world, he replied. You and the children. Looking around at their new family and friends, Lisa realized that sometimes the worst things that happen to us can lead to the best things. She had lost everything, but in losing it, she had found something better than she had ever imagined. The abandoned shack still stood on the mountain, but it was no longer a place of desperation. It had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that, even in the darkest times, help can come from the most unexpected places.